Alrighty out there, nerds, I am Bold Jessie now, which means I'm gonna have some of this by the end of this video. Yes, hello there, interwebs. I am here to review the 4th episode of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, this time called... I did not remember the name of the episode. Room for Growth. The episode name is Room for Growth. And actually, yes, I am not joking. I just got this in the mail. They sent me like a Lower Decks like care package sort of thing, and it came with Ketracel White Hot in it. And I have not even opened this thing yet, and I'm kind of curious what it tastes like. So I'm gonna have some at the end of this review. So look forward to that. You know, if I was the real Bold Jessie, I'd try and do the review while eating this, but I'm not that bold. I'm not Boimler bold. Anywho, let's actually get to what you all came here for, which is my review of this episode. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite episode of the season so far. I know other people will probably like the big high adventure of some of the other episodes this season, but I loved this one so much because not only did it give us like cool little looks inside the Cerritos ship and like elements of like Starfleet ships that we haven't really gotten in quite a while. Unless, of course, you count like the big TARDIS turbo lift room that we got to see in Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Outside of that, though, which I don't really count. This episode was just like a great fun for any of us who like love like starship schematics and love seeing like the nooks and crannies of a starship, that would like study those old like schematic designs that they would give out that they like sold in books and would just like pour over them and like wonder what it would be like to see these elements of the ship that we never got to see in the show. This episode is definitely for you, and I loved all of that stuff. But not only that, the sort of main sort of storyline and thematics of this was the type of thematics that always get me when it comes to Star Trek. And it's about characters coming together and forming bonds and friendships and like sticking together no matter what, and finding that to be the biggest thing that they care about. And those sort of themes within any Star Trek episode will always just hit me right in the gut and make me like love the episode overall. So for me, this is just hitting my particular niche of types of Star Trek stories that I really, really enjoy. But then even on top of that, the other story that was going on in this episode with the engineers, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second, also hit me particularly as someone who is a little bit of a workaholic. Like I tend to get stressed when I am not working, and like when I sit down to just like take care of myself and play video games, I get anxious that I'm not getting stuff done when I do that. So that side of the episode also spoke to me very hard. So this episode really just like kind of like perfectly hit me right where I needed to hear certain things. So yeah, I really enjoyed just all of that. But then we'll talk about it in a second, but my favorite scene of the episode had nothing to do with either of those, but was a holodeck scene. And if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about, because that scene was just fan-freaking-tastic, and I nearly died with laughter just watching it, because it was just great. So, with all that being said, this is easily my favorite episode of the season so far. But, to talk about it more, I am going to get into spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode yet, here's where you get off and start exploring the Cerritos, because you got some work to do. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this episode specifically. And yes, I know you're all looking at this mug. I got it at Emerald City Comic Con. I'm not sponsored by the people who make this mug. It's just a cool mug, and I kind of wanted to show it off a little bit. Could also put that Ketracel White Hot in the coffee. I'm not that bold. Not that bold. Anyways, let's actually talk spoilers within this episode. So we start off the episode with our lower deckers just hanging out, and there's just chaos, people running all around, and them sort of complaining about the fact that there's just too much going on the ship. At least Mariner is feeling that way, which is clearly setting up our characters' arcs for the episode, with them wanting to get those like first level private quarters. So it's just a good place to start their arc. But I loved Captain Freeman coming through possessed by the mask, turning everything into like the Legends of the Hidden Temple on the ship. And I love this for like several reasons. I mean, first and most obviously, this is parodying the Next Generation Season 7 episode Masks, which is considered to be one of the worst episodes of the Next Generation. I personally really kind of enjoy that episode, just simply for Brent Spiner's overacting throughout it. I mean, like, who cannot enjoy Masaka is waking?
Masaka is waking.
Like, I feel bad for Brent Spiner because he just had to do that because he didn't know how to, like, characterize each one of these versions of the mask that he was dealing with in that episode, but I have fun with it. I think he did a great job for what he was dealing with, and I enjoyed it. But then also, I really just, credit to the animators, like, the look of the ship as it's, like, turned into this temple version, you get, like, little aqueducts on the side, just looked really, really cool. I have to say, like, just the animation on all of that stuff was great. Also, Boimler going, I just tuned that, when he had the violin just also. I was like, oh, poor Boims. Then, after the opening credits, we get this sequence where we sort of learn that the engineering staff is overworked from having to turn all that Hidden Temple stuff back into, like, starships. And we hear, like, the like, evac workings of the ship had turned into vines and stuff. And I'm like, dear God, that had to be a pain in the ass. And I love seeing Billups just really stressed the fuck out. And the bit where Freeman just says, like, Dr. Anna's calling you a pile of fucking stress was great. But then when he says, oh, I don't tell her how to hypo her sprays, also had me, but what put the like the nail on the button, that's the phrase I'm going with. It was when he like slapped Shax, and Shax just has this like exasperated look on his face. Was great. And again, this is setting up the workaholism storyline that we're going to be dealing with this whole episode. And again, as a workaholic, I can relate. I can relate very hard to Billups. But then we learn about the lottery for these like high quality deck 1 private quarters that the lower deckers want. But then they also learn once Tendi goes after her little goo monster thing that I really kind of enjoyed seeing. I wish that had continued the other episode because it was very, very cute. But we got to see that they learned that Delta Shift was also going after these quarters as well. And it's nice to see the return of Delta Shift. I don't remember if they appeared in season 2. They may have in the background or in little elements, but they were certainly in season 1. So it was nice to see them being sort of a recurring rivalry here. I also love Tendi's line, I always wanted to explore an ethical gray area, which is just such a Tendi thing to say. Dear God, I love Tendi so much. So from here we have 2 separate storylines, so I'll focus on one and then I'll jump to the other. So our first one is where we have Rutherford and Captain Freeman and Billups going off to the Dove in order to try and get some relaxation time. And when we get to the Dove, a few things with this. Not only does the ship itself remind me of the Farm from season 1 of Lower Decks, which was the ship that we saw where a lot of people who had gone through like transporter accidents or different like scientific accidents in Starfleet got sent off to, or at least that's the ship they were heading off onto to get to the Farm. So this sort of, both in name and the look of the ship remind me of that. But then we have an Adosian, which is those 3-armed aliens from the animated series, running the Dove as well. And we also had an Adosian running the Farm as well over in that episode. So I just kind of like this like weird Lower Decks mythology that like therapeutic or mental like facility ships within Starfleet are run by Adosians. That's kind of like a weird background element that's not drawn attention to, but I do like seeing it. Again, these like little world building elements are just sort of cool in Lower Decks. But then they get these sort of like stress mood rings on their wrists, and we get to see some of the facilities of the Dove. I love that the Adosian lady says that for the deviant among you, you would get kittens. And I'm like, ooh, I would definitely be one of the deviant people with the kittens. I'm definitely a deviant. Then we also have the Klingon going crazy, and she's like, yeah, he's been in there a while. We don't want to go in there to stop him, which was great. But then we also see that we're still dealing with the engineers being workaholics as they're just trying to fix the door because that's all they can think about. And then the episode from here just goes through a couple little bits where we have the engineers building schematics in a sand garden, which is pissing Freeman off progressively more and more. And then we even see that eventually they put on like cucumbers onto their wristbands to hide the fact that they are still working and doing and like building things and everything like that. Like when the one engineer said like, oh, is no one else sneaking a little build time? I'm like, I know engineers. They are very much like that. They do that very much so. But then all of this causes Captain Freeman to stress the fuck out, and then she might be taken away from the Cerritos because she's literally got black on her wristband, which means she's extremely stressed. And then Freeman's like freaking out as she's trying to like hang out with the puppies, and even adorable little puppies aren't doing anything, which means you are very, very stressed if puppies aren't doing anything for you. And I love that the Adosian lady is just like smoking a vape, still getting vapes in the future, which I thought was just kind of funny. Like, I don't know if this is the intention on the episode, but it just reminds me of the fact that like Gene Roddenberry had a big thing about no smoking in the Starfleet future. It's like a big thing that was part of Star Trek The Motion Picture, or one of those like weird little quirky behind the scenes things that you hear about. So I wonder if this like vaping thing was sort of an oblong reference to that. It would be very funny if it was. It might have just also just been like, oh, it's a weird thing that you would have a vape. But if it is an oblong reference to Gene Roddenberry not wanting smoking in the future, I think that that's kind of a good little like really deep cut. It's a similar deep cut, by the way, to, and this is me just, my brain just going off for a second here, but it reminds me of Star Trek Picard Season 2's premiere episode where you had Rios sort of affecting having a cigar, but you never actually see him light it because, again, no smoking on Starfleet ships, as per Gene Roddenberry. But then we see that the engineers actually built a machine to remove stress from people. It can like basically give you an experience of being on the Dove for a month. Freeman uses it, and it's absolutely amazing. And then the Edojian's like, destroy that machine because it would ruin our actual lives here on the Dove. All of that was fun. It was a nice little resolution. And again, kind of fits like this sort of ethos of Star Trek, where it's just like they got relaxed by helping out somebody. Like the engineers relaxed because they were helping somebody, not just like doing work. And I think that was just kind of cool. I really enjoyed that. Though, by the way, I really could use that machine. Like, please, can you send me one? I need one really badly because I am also stressed the fuck out a lot of the time. Again, workaholic. It's a problem. Don't armchair psychoanalyze me. Enjoy the review that I'm giving you. But that is that storyline. But if we rewind, we can go back to the rest of our crew members as they head off to try to find a shortcut to get to the panel that will allow them to put their names into the lottery, or like sort of rig the lottery in order to beat both Delta Shift and give themselves the room. And everything to do with this storyline was just so much fun. But first off, we start off with my favorite scene of the episode that I was referring to earlier, where they go through the holodeck and they run into Shax and T'Ana, basically doing like a sex role play bank heist storyline, which was great. I mean, first off, Boimler not knowing how to say bank and saying baonk was great. But then just them being horrified as they realize that they walked into and that it's very, very awkward. And then Dr. T'Ana like getting turned on by turning off the safety protocols while in a hail of bullets. And then Boimler also almost getting hit by one was also kind of funny. But like, I'm like, dang. But then what I loved this scene the most for, and it's why I love Lower Decks' writing so much, is that while this was all very hysterical and funny, we do get an actual, like, kind of sincere argument between T'Ana and Shax here, where we actually get to see, like, a little bit of a progression in the relationship. Up until now, we see them just kind of be horny for each other and, like, hanging out and just kissing each other in the background of a lot of episodes and little small moments. But here, it's actually they have an argument where Shax is like, look, we haven't really talked. I died and came back and we didn't really discuss it. And T'Ana sort of opens up about that fact. It's like, look, I'll be open with you about how I lost my tail, which Tendi is very interested in hearing, by the way, which I thought was fun. But scenes like that are what I love Lower Decks for, is because they can manage to just kind of really give a full arc of a relationship, even in just one-off, even kind of background scenes within stories. It reminds me of in season 2, we had the episode Weege Dooge, where that episode had so much going on in it, but we also, in the background of certain scenes, got a little arc for Mariner and Captain Freeman and how their relationship progressed, even in just like a few one-off scenes that were in the background of Boimler's story. And so I just really think Lower Decks' writing is so good because it manages to tell these like big stories for just 30 minutes, but then even within that, tell these like small little character arc stories through one-off beats and moments, like this Shax and T'Ana scene just exemplify. So just excellent job, and also hysterical. This brings us, though, to the next challenge that our Lower Deckers face, which is the, like, swamp bit that they have to go through. And again, it makes sense that, like, on Starfleet ships, they would have a swamp. I mean, if we can get, like, mushroom fungus gardens on Discovery and other hydroponics bays throughout different Star Trek shows, like on Voyager, Cass had her hydroponics bays, and also Keiko O'Brien also, I think, dealt with plants as well. Maybe yeah, she was a botanist, right? I believe. Forgetting off the top of my head, but anyways, it makes sense that there would be a swamp room on the ship. But I found this hysterical where they like started to get affected by the chemicals in the air. Tendi obviously not being bothered by it because she's an Orion, but just the fact that they like start hallucinating. But what got me the most was when it cuts back to them from Tendi's perspective, and Boimler's just like, I'm gonna figure my way out of this maze, and they're just freaking out. It was great. And then Tendi sort of shooing them through to the next room, and Tendi saying like, I'm sorry, I made you hatch from your egg, and Mariner's like, no, it's okay, I was just like safe in there. And it was just like, oh, adorable. Then we get another cool scene where we get to see them inside the deflector dish and sort of like running around and having fun in low grav. Reminds me a little bit of Star Trek Enterprise, where we had Travis in a few episodes hanging out in that one spot on the ship that had low gravity. It's like this little spot in the middle of the ship that like the artificial gravity didn't really touch. So it sort of reminded me of those scenes from Enterprise. But them just having fun and enjoying themselves, very Willy Wonka-esque. And because it is sort of Willy Wonka-esque, they get into trouble with the deflector dish being activated. One note here is that the deflector dish is activated by Ransom and Shax. And I'm just sitting here being like, wait, so did Shax like hang out with Dr. T'Ana? They went and had sex behind stellar cartography, and then Shax went right on duty, like all within like 10-15 minutes? Because like, dang, impressive, Shax, impressive. But then they manage to escape and they rescue Boimler from almost dying because he was bold anti-grab boy, which was funny. And a small little note here too is I'm liking that Boimler is getting more and more bold, going back to what we saw in episode 2 of this season. And so we're starting to see Boimler just get progressively more and more risk-taking with his adventures. And I'm liking that, again, small little arc being seeded throughout his character this entire season that we're seeing coming out here, where he's willing to be a little bit more risky than he normally is. And that being critiqued and sort of curtailed a little bit with, like, Mariner saying, like, you're gonna die at some point if you keep up with this. It's unsustainable. So I like those little elements here. But then the lower deckers finally get to the hatch that's right before the console, and they sit and wait, and they sort of discuss, like, how they'll let people enter into their quarters by saying, like, come or enter friend. Again, I love Tendi, adore her. But then, obviously, Delta Shift showing up at the same time, and them sort of bonding at this moment. I love the story about Ransom making a churro wife. Lovely, and I love that it comes back at the end of the episode, too, with him ordering more churros. That's just, like, a really weird and unique scenario that, like, I never would have thought of, but it's just so funny. So I love seeing that. But then, obviously, Delta Shift was sort of trying to trick them by saying, like, yeah, we'll all stick together, we'll put all the names together, and then they sneak through in the end anyways, which, yeah, dang you, Delta Shift. But then Boimler figuring out, like, oh, I can be bold Boimler, and finding a way around that, and they get to the console, but then they decide, like, no, we actually don't want to do this, because we don't want to lose our friendship. They'll destroy their friendship this way, you know, there's only one room, not 4, so, you know, we want to stick together so we won't put our names in. And then I love it immediately cutting to, because I thought of this, I'm like, why not just share the room, as we saw in, like, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, where Uhura was a cadet that shared a room with several other people as well in that show. Why not share the room? And that's clearly what Delta Shift does, and I love Rutherford coming back and being like, what the hell, man? You could have had that room! We could have been together! And they're like, yeah, we know, it sucks. I thought it was great. And then, of course, we have the Ransom button with the Cerritos, with the churros there at the end there, too. So, overall, this was a great episode. Like I said, what really gets me in the end is just the wonderful character writing we get with, like, Shax and Ta'ana, and also Boimler's continuing arc throughout the season, as well as some themes about workaholism that I also enjoyed because it resonated with me. But then, of course, the thing that I love most about this episode is what we get to see in those moments between Tendi, Boimler, and Mariner, where they just sort of talk about, like, yeah, we want to stick together. Our friendship means more to us than anything else. And while it is sort of undercut at the end, I do think that that those messages of just community and caring for each other over everything else are just really what I love Star Trek, and specifically Lower Decks, for. So yeah, this was a great episode, and easily my favorite of the episodes this season. So yeah, Lower Decks continuing to be one of my favorite shows on TV. I'm adoring it. But with that said, it is time for me to try some Catch or Cell White Hot. I can never open these damn things. Don't judge me. As my dad said, your teeth aren't a multi-tool. Well, screw you, Dad. Love you, Dad. Don't judge me, Dad. So, am I gonna be a Boimler or a Mariner here? Is this gonna go well for me, or is this gonna go badly? All right, it's on there. You can actually see it. Okay. Actually, that's really good. Bless the founders. Actually, that's not a bad hot sauce. Wow, for like free hot sauce that I got sent to me in like a care package thing, that's actually pretty good. Also, I just noticed on the bottle it says locally sourced from the Gamma Quadrant, and locally is in quotes. And then you see that this is made by Quark Industries. So, it's very clear that like Quark is just doing some surreptitious things with this bottle. Yeah, the hot sauce actually, it's not too hot, but it's excuse me, starting to get to me. It actually is actually a pretty decent hot sauce. Dang. All right. Well, I thought it would be even worse, but yeah, no, it's just a decently good hot sauce. To be fair, I have a high tolerance for hot sauce. So that's my review of Catch a Cell White Hot and the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, though, down below. Don't forget to subscribe for more reviews of Lower Decks. I'll be reviewing House of the Dragon, as well as, I think, Lord of the Rings Rings of Power should be out soon, or already out by the time you see this, as well as, what else am I reviewing? Oh, She-Hulk as well. So, all that stuff's on this channel. Don't forget to check out my main channel. I have podcasts and stuff down below. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you, as always, my friends, live long and prosper.